Ayrton Senna da Silva was born in Sao Paulo, Brazil, the 21st of March 1960. He has been a World Formula One champion in 1988, 1990 and 1991. He then died in Imola, in Italy, the 1st of May of 1994. He was born to a wealthy family who supported his aspiration to race. He began driving cars at an early age. His earliest recorded race was a fun go-kart race, aged 4. He drew a lot for pole position and won his race. Age 17, he won the South American Kart Championship. In the early 1980s, he moved to England to further his motor racing. In 1981, he won the British Formula Ford 1060 championship. It was around this time that he settled on his mother's maiden name of Senna, rather than the much more common De Silva, which was his father's name. In 1982, he made further progress, winning the European and British Formula Ford 2000. With a growing reputation as a skilled driver, he received testing from various Formula One teams, such as Williams and McLaren, but because of intense competition, his first Formula One team was Toleman, who Senna drove for in 1984. Senna brought an extraordinary level of commitment to his motor racing, to such an extent that clashes with fellow rivals and the media were inevitable. He had a towering self-belief that sometimes bordered on zealotry. The first manifestation of that belief came at the small Cadwell Park track in Lincolnshire in 1983. Senna had won 9 consecutive Formula 3 races, but crashed heavily in practice for this 10th round. But even when his car was out of control, he kept his foot hard on the power. He would never surrender anything without a fight. He won the championship that year and sprang into Formula One with the Toleman team for 1984. He scored his first World Championship point in only his second Grand Prix, when, despite heat and exhaustion, he came home 6th in South Africa. Later that year came the first sign of the other side of his nature, when he left the team in acrimonious circumstances to join Lotus. Once the news of Senna's impending defection had been revealed, Alex Oakridge, the manager of Toleman, suspended him from the Italian Grand Prix before the end of their relationship. Senna was stunned. "I did it," Oakridge revealed, "because it was important to teach him that for every negative action you perform in life there is a penalty." It was a lesson that Senna never forgot, even if he never came to approve of any sanction against himself. With Lotus, he won his first Grand Prix in Portugal in 1985, but by 1987 he had lost patience as he conventionally hid Alain Prost's situation at McLaren. Their partnership at McLaren in 1988 made all other sporting feats look tame, but by the end of that season the first World Championship had been delivered, in true Senna style. He stole his car at the start of Grand Prix at Suzuka, before storming home to win on a track rendered greasy by rain. On the way he beat Prost soundly. Earlier that year, he had demonstrated the dark side of his character by deliberately swerving at Prost as they raced wheel-to-wheel down the long straight at the Estoril track in Portugal. Time and again, Senna's blend of impetuosity and self-redoubtedness led him into trouble. He railed against exclusion from victory in the 1989 Japanese Grand Prix after a collision with Prost, accusing the sport's governing body of cheating him out of a second title. He was forced to make an apology of sorts before he was granted a license for the following year. By then, Prost had left for Ferrari, and the two fought for the championship again at Suzuka. There, in a move that prompted Sub to question what his sheer competitive intensity and his feeling of being wronged could push him to, Senna drove into the back of Prost's Ferrari when the Frenchman beat him into the first corner. With both retiring on the spot, Senna clinched his second championship at Prost's expense. 2 weeks later, when I showed him a series of photographs of the incident and asked him why he had apparently driven Prost off the road, Senna refused to accept the damning evidence in front of us, denying the physical position of the car despite the photographer had recorded. A year later, in an extraordinary outburst following the victory in the Japanese Grand Prix, which had clinched his third World Championship, he finally admitted that he had deliberately driven Prost off the track, that it would be tit for tat for what he had seen as Prost's role in his downfall in 1989. Without question, Ayrton Senna was an extraordinary individual. Over the years, his relationships were often like a roller coaster, but to his friends he was intensely loyal. In 1983, when he was racing in Formula 3, he struck me as a lonely man who felt that the British press preferred his rival Martin Brundle. And to an extent, he remained a vulnerable character despite his over-aggression on the track and the occasionally disdainful manner that his successes had developed. Much of it seemed like a protective wall, and there was another Ayrton Senna deep within. This was an altogether kinder man, the sort who would give up his seat to usher an old lady down the stairs while once waiting for an appointment with Professor Sid Watkins of the London Hospital, the regular chief medical officer at Grand Prix, and the man who yesterday administered to him at the Tamburello corner which claimed his life. In his homeland he was lionized, and he made significant charitable donations which he never remotely attempted to publicize. He loved children too. They are the honest ones, he said once. He once said, "If he didn't like you, you knew it." In 1986, he was at war with the British press after preventing Derek Warwick from joining him at Lotus. Over the years, that animosity mellowed, but often the feeling he nurtured that his trust had been betrayed caused flare-ups. He was roundly condemned last year for striking his rival at Irvine, again almost inevitably at Suzuka, and the Cold War began again. But whatever some of his failings may have been, Senna was a man with whom you always knew where you stood, and thought his tactics on the track were frequently and deliberately intimidatory. He was without question one of the greatest racing drivers the world has ever known. To see Senna on a quick lap was to be awed by majesty. In the first 2 races of the 1994 season, he gained pole position, but for different reasons failed to finish. The third race of the season was to be held at Imola, San Marino. Senna said his campaign would start here, leaving him to win the 14 out of the remaining 16 races. However, the weekend was marred by accidents and tragedy. Firstly, in the practice round on Friday, his compatriot Rubens Barrichello was badly injured in an accident when his Jordan car flipped over, smashing into a fence. On the next day, Saturday, Austrian rookie driver Roland Ratzenberger was killed when he smashed into a concrete wall. Senna had only recently met Ratzenberger, but he was emotionally affected. Senna went to see the scene of the accident and climbed over the medical fence to see the crash site. Senna spent his final morning meeting with fellow drivers and considering how to best improve driver safety for Formula One. On Friday afternoon, he took pole position for the race, in which he died, the 16th time he had been fastest in practice for a Grand Prix. With a commanding success in his last race for the McLaren team in 1993, he had taken his total of Grand Prix victories to 41, second only to that of his arch rival Prost. When he finally joined the Williams team for 1994, he spoke of the need for a fresh challenge, and he was determined to redress the points imbalance between himself and Schumacher that made this season so exciting after the first two races. To all witness him at work, it seemed that Ayrton Senna's artistry and air of invincibility would always protect him no matter what. On the 7th lap, Senna suffered a fatal crash. On the high-speed Tamburello corner the car left the track at around 205 miles per hour, hitting the concrete retaining wall at around 135 miles per hour. Although he was rushed to hospital, he was declared dead on the arrival. In a weekend when motorsport was thrown into despair, it lost one of the greatest kings it will ever know. To many, especially those with whom he worked, he will always be the greatest. His death was a great shock to the world of sport, and to Brazil in particular. It is estimated 3 million people lined the streets of Sao Paulo for the return of his body, a record gathering for any memorial.